Ecuador's Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of the decriminalization of abortion for victims of rape. The foreign ministers of Russia and Mexico and representatives of the Russian Direct Investment Fund announced the start of the production and packaging of the Sputnik V vaccine in Mexico. President of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, has called for elections as tensions escalate in the country. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Ecuador's Constitutional Court has ruled in favor of the decriminalization of abortion for victims of rape. With 7 votes in favor and 2 against, the court ruled in favor of a lawsuit filed in July 2019 by women's rights organizations arguing that Articles 149 and also 150 of the Criminal Code shall be declared unconstitutional. The articles, which will now be abolished, establish that the abortion in Ecuador is illegal except when performed in the case of a threat to the life of a pregnant woman or when the pregnancy is the result of rape of a mentally disabled woman. The decision marks a historic victory for movements defending women's sexual and reproductive rights and challenging increasing gender violence in Ecuador. In Colombia, people took to the streets of the capital, Bogotá, on Wednesday as part of the national strike action calling the rejection of the tax reform presented by the government of Iván Duque. The controversial reform includes an increase in value-added tax, the establishment of urban road tolls, and the elimination of deductions and subsidies. The proposed reform has met stiff resistance in Congress, including from a coalition of parties that supports President Iván Duque's government. Opponents stress the changes will not necessarily burden taxpayers who are already stretched by the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Trade unions mobilized to protest the reform as well as other government policies, demanding that the legislature analyze the proposal, which they argue violates the rights of Colombians and favors corruption and tax evasion. And now we move on because Colombia's notorious anti-riot squad mobilized to disperse demonstrators in the capital. The repressive acts left at least 1 person injured as the squad launched tear gas at those rallying. Since the early hours of morning, citizens have taken to the streets of Bogotá as part of the national strike action called by the National Strike Committee for Life, Peace, Democracy and against the president's proposed tax reform. On Tuesday, a Bogotá court granted the request of far-right President Iván Duque to suspend permissions for anti-government protests on Wednesday and Labor Day celebrations on May the 1st. However, the strike organizers stressed they will maintain the mobilization. Chilean President Sebastián Piñera has enacted the law that allows a thorough early withdrawal of 10% from private pension funds after the Constitutional Court rejected his attempt to block the bill supported by Congress. The court rejected the president's claims that the bill was unconstitutional, with 7 votes in favor of the bill and 3 against. The pension system in Chile has been completely privatized ever since the dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet. Piñera had moved to present an alternative bill which will include the state injecting fresh money into the private pension system. However, the original bill was widely supported both by the population and Congress, including by supporters of the president. The early pension withdrawals for Chileans have been approved as a means to alleviate the financial hardships faced by the population in the midst of the economic crisis, aggravated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Uruguayan school transport owners protested in front of the presidential palace on Tuesday to demand tax exemptions and more government credits for their business, which has been paralyzed by school closures and distance learning implemented in the country due to the pandemic.
Vehicles are parked and we have nothing to eat. We have nothing to eat. We don't have any way to pay. So if the government doesn't help us, school transportation dies.
We need a small solution, something. something. If not, we don't have how to pay. Simple.
In the United States, a judge has ruled that body camera footage showing the moments when African-American Andrew Brown Jr. was shot and killed by police will not be released to the public at this time. The judge said he will reconsider a public release in the next 30 to 45 days, and some of the footage can be disclosed to certain members of Brown's family, but for now, it will not be released to the public to protect an active internal and criminal investigation or potential internal criminal investigation. Andrew Brown Jr. was shot 5 times by police, including in the back of the neck as he tried to drive away from several police officers in what his family described as an execution, demanding that all body camera video be released. The FBI has opened a federal civil rights investigation into Brown's death, while officials in Elizabeth City, whose population is nearly 20,000, declare a state of emergency and order a curfew in anticipation of possible protests over the latest killing of an African American at the hands of the police. President Joe Biden made his first address to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday night. He pressed his agenda, which includes a $2 trillion plan and a newly unveiled $1.8 trillion plan for families, children, and students. During his speech, Biden claimed to be looking to sustain economic growth following the passage of his massive COVID relief and stimulus plan as the country recovers from the pandemic. He is also pushing for mass vaccinations against COVID-19 as demand slips slightly and cases come down. The president has also made the case for a board green energy initiative as part of his infrastructure and jobs plan in a bid to restructure the economy for years to come. He also briefly called on Congress to pass legislation that will raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. On Wednesday, the European Parliament overwhelmingly voted to ratify the trade deal between the United Kingdom and the European Union, as members of the Parliament branded Brexit as a historic mistake. The Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which has been in provisional effect since January, will come into force next month. The agreement was approved with 660 votes in favor to 5 against, and 32 abstentions, representing the final political hurdle facing the accord. MEPs had been holding up ratification amid concerns that the UK was not implementing its side of the Brexit settlement on Northern Ireland repeatedly. If the agreement had not passed, the UK and the EU's terms on trade would have degraded even further, with rates and quotas applicable on goods. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen welcomed the deal's approval, but stated that faithful implementation is essential. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back from the South. At a bilateral meeting in Moscow, the foreign ministers of Russia and Mexico and representatives of the Russian Direct Investment Fund announced the start of production and packaging of the Sputnik V vaccine in Mexico. Foreign ministers Sergei Lavrov and Marcelo Ebrard confirmed that Mexico began bottling and packaging the vaccine from May. The two officials also discussed the arrival of 12 million doses of Sputnik V instead of the 24 million previously agreed, after the development of a new vaccine format which only requires a single dose. The visit by the Mexican foreign minister, which concludes on Thursday, includes discussion on the diversification of relations in the economic, commercial and investment spheres. Mexican teachers are being vaccinated against COVID-19 with China's CanSino vaccine as the country sees a fall in infections. Mexico's official COVID-19 death toll of around 215,000 is the third highest in the world, after those of the United States and Brazil.
Hard time getting used to technology because I was used to work with my kids, the chalk and the blackboard, and running around with them. Maybe we will not be able to have a life like before, but the vaccine brings us some peace of mind so we can work safely.
The director of the Pan American Health Organization has urged countries with extra doses of COVID-19 vaccines to donate them to Latin American nations, which are suffering from a surge in cases and limited vaccine supplies.
Our region has demonstrated that it can successfully distribute COVID vaccines quickly and effectively. Yet, supplies are still far behind what is this region's urgent need for more doses. And that's why we want again to urge countries with extra doses to consider donating a significant portion of these to the Americas, where these life-saving doses are desperately needed and will be promptly used.
The Assistant Director of the Pan American Health Organization explains that the interruption in the supply of the AstraZeneca vaccine from India will impact not only the target countries for those doses, but the whole region.
Because we have 3 countries in the region that receive AstraZeneca vaccine from India, which are Bolivia, Haiti, and Nicaragua. But with the interruption in India, which so far has not resulted in a decision to reship vaccines, all other countries may also suffer a significant reduction in vaccine supply because AstraZeneca vaccines from other producers will be shared by all.
People in the Uatuma Sustainable Development Reserve in the Brazilian Amazon are being vaccinated against COVID-19 with the support of a private NGO, the Sustainable Amazon Foundation. Instead of vaccinating by age of race groups, as in other parts of the country, the pilot project will vaccinate 100% of eligible people in all communities in the reserve. Brazilian authorities have faced criticism for their failure to protect vulnerable indigenous communities in the Amazon from the virus.
In these remote locations. So, our recommendation is a vaccination of 100% of the vaccinable members of the community. Not everyone is eligible, but all those eligible can do it at once. And with that, the arrival of the vaccine in these areas becomes viable.
The feeling we have today is of total gratitude to God and science, because it's through this vaccine that we renew our expectations for the future.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Wednesday said that the pandemic poses a threat to press freedom. Guterres was addressing an online discussion in the lead-up to World Press Freedom Day on May the 3rd.
Of the past year have reminded us that access to reliable information is more than just a basic human right. It can also be a matter of life and death. The COVID-19 pandemic has been accompanied by an enormous concurrent infodemic. Misinformation and hate speech have proliferated, jeopardizing the health of millions of people worldwide, undermining confidence in vaccines and science, and dividing communities and countries. The pandemic has had another very dangerous side effect. It has accelerated the financial decline of many public interest media organizations.
In Germany, COVID-19 has dealt yet another blow to the sports industry as the government adopts stricter measures to curb a third wave of infections. According to the president of the German Olympic Committee, the country's sports clubs have lost nearly 1 million members to the coronavirus pandemic. The restrictions have impacted both amateur and professional athletes for months, as no games or sports training have been possible since the beginning of November. Meanwhile, around 90,000 sports clubs throughout the country remain closed. Following the amended version of the Infection Protection Act, professional and elite athletes competing for national teams may continue to train and participate in competitions, still without an audience and in compliance with protective and hygiene measures. Also in Japan, Government Minister Kazuhiro Sugita stated on Wednesday that COVID countermeasures are still the biggest obstacle to holding the 2021 Tokyo Summer Olympics. The Japanese government is reviewing studies on countermeasures as athletes and tournament officials arrive in the country. Local organizers and the International Olympic Committee have pushed ahead with plans to open the postponed Tokyo Olympics in just under 3 months. Meanwhile, the death toll in Japan from COVID-19 reached 10,000, which is disturbing compared to other places in Asia, such as Taiwan, Vietnam, Thailand, or South Korea. New restrictions were recently implemented in Tokyo and other parts of the country in the face of rising case numbers. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. On Wednesday, the president of Somalia, Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed, called for elections, announcing the would ask parliament for its approval this Saturday. Government allies requested the president issue an urgent call for elections and avoid delays in the process, after alleged and violent protests in the capital Mogadishu as well as other regions of the country. Tensions have escalated since February the 8th, when Abdullahi's presidential term ended without the mandatory subsequent elections. Clashes between armed groups have been reported. At least 7 people were killed and more than 11 others wounded when a vehicle exploded outside a police headquarters in the Somalian capital, authorities stated on Wednesday. A doctor at the local hospital said they had received 13 wounded people, 2 of whom died on arrival. The Al-Shabaab extremist group claimed responsibility for the attack. The group often targets high-profile areas of the capital, and observers had warned that it could take advantage of Somalia's current political tensions to strike again. On Wednesday, Indonesian police smashed a drug smuggling gang that moved 2.5 tons of meth into the country from Afghanistan. In a series of police raids in the capital, Jakarta, in recent weeks, 17 suspects were arrested on drugs offenses. Some were condemned to the death penalty for trafficking under Indonesia's tough drug laws. According to police, some of the methamphetamine had been placed inside food containers and then hidden in boats or lockers on land. The Southeast Asian archipelago has become a key destination and transit point for international drug trafficking.
We managed to uncover the smuggling of crystal methamphetamine from the Middle East amounting to 2.5 tons and arrested 18 suspects. Suspects with initials NK, KW, AG, K, AN, RI, and AL are convicts with sentences of 10-year imprisonment and death. However, they still could control the international drug network.
Syria's parliament met this Wednesday to finalize the process of offering support to the 51 nominees for candidates to next month's presidential election. Parliament Speaker Hamoudeh Sbah closed and sealed the bags containing handwritten support from members of the People's Assembly in front of the national media outlets. The Syrian elections law stipulates that in order to run for the post of president, an applicant must obtain written support from at least 35 members of parliament. The May 26 election will be the second to be held since the start of the 10-year Western-imposed terrorist war in the country. Current President Bashar al-Assad is standing for a 4th term. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said Wednesday that China welcomes objective and fair voices from the international community on Xinjiang-related issues. The statements came after Singapore's Chinese-language newspaper published a report highlighting that claims of forced labor in the northwestern Chinese region are completely baseless.
I've also taken note of the report. The author is an education consultant with more than a decade-long experience working and living in Xinjiang. He said that the groundless allegation of forced labor in Xinjiang is not only absurd, but also exposes the ignorance of those behind it. During the cotton picking season, workers seeking employment from inland provinces in China will travel to Xinjiang to meet the shortfall of laborers and help the cotton growers bring in the harvest. In return, the workers get generous remunerations. As you can see, this is a win-win. Besides, with the development and wide application of agricultural machinery, manual labor is being replaced more and more by alleging forced cotton picking by minorities. Certain people are defilling the speckless cotton in Xinjiang and maligning the socio-economic progress in the region.
Japan's parliament approved the country's integration to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, signed by 16 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. The agreement includes the 10 member countries of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, together with China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, and is considered the largest free trade agreement in the world. It covers an area with around 2.2 billion consumers and approximately 30% of the global gross domestic product, representing around $26.2 trillion. The signatories hope that the free trade bloc will be a boost for pandemic-hit economies across the region by progressively phasing out 90% of the tariffs of imports between signatories, as well as organizing multi-country supply chains and codifying new e-commerce rules. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa testified this Wednesday before the Commission of Inquiry into state capture over allegations of corruption during the administration of former President Jacob Zuma. Ramaphosa faced questions about the role of the African National Congress Party in corruption in government and state companies. The president told Judge Sondo that state capture took place under our watch, but limited culpability to a small circle, saying that the vast majority of ANC leaders, members and cadres are vehemently opposed to corruption in all its manifestations. Ramaphosa became president in 2018, succeeding Zuma, who was forced to step down due to accusations of abuse of power and constitutional duty known as state capture. The hearing will continue on Thursday, where President Ramaphosa is expected to explain the political funding for his 2017 presidential campaign. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telesur English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.